Hey guys, I'd like to share with you my test of a $20 bug out bag. Sometimes the cost of a bug out bag is rather prohibitive. If you buy one that's already pre-made, you can spend hundreds of dollars, and if you build your own and you buy high quality components all the way, you can be spending a lot more than that. So my thought was, can you actually survive for 72 hours, how long a go bag or a bug out bag is supposed to last, on only a $20 bill? So because of that, I went to Dollar Tree and picked up 18 items, which took a $20 bill. And now I'd like to test that out and see if you could survive on that. Right now the conditions are pretty good. It's relatively warm. Has been raining all day yesterday and last night, so the ground and the wood is rather wet. And tonight we're supposed to get some cooler weather down to around 24, 25 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's -3, -4 degrees centigrade. So what exactly do I have with me? Well, I have clothing, thermal layer on, belt, boots. I have a cap with me. In addition to that, I have a waterproof bag, some extra batteries, and some filming equipment. Those things will exclusively be used for the filming of this, nothing else. So let's see how it goes. So I found here what I think will be a good spot. It is a little more sloped than I would have preferred. The only advantage I can see to that, though, is I won't have any water, hopefully, pulling up under me. So the next step will be going and trying to find a small creek or riverbed, and I'm looking for 3 particular stones. I am looking for a flat stone to put a better edge on my knife. I'm looking for some smooth stones to help me set up a water barrier, and I am looking for some quartz to also help me sharpen that knife. Here we have a relatively smooth stone, very few sharp edges that could cut through any plastic, so this is one to keep. Here looks like to be a piece of quartz, so we will definitely take that along with us also. Unfortunately, almost anywhere you go, you will be able to find human trash. Here happens to be a piece of barbed wire. If you're really in a situation where your survival is at stake, you would definitely avail yourself of any resource that you can find. For instance, if you were in your car, under most circumstances, you would want to stay with your car because it makes a marvelous shelter and it has some very good insulatory properties. However, for this test, I'm going to avoid using any of these unnatural resources. So the time is now about 8:22, and we're going to start constructing the shelter. So I've gotten one of the painter's drop cloths up. I'm going to be using this as a tarp. And a few notes regarding this. One, the string here that we're using, if you are used to 550, this is a completely different animal. This string, if you really bear down on it to cinch it up or to get it tight, it just smiles at you and then breaks. So if you're used to 550, a heads up there. Also, the painter's cloth itself is a very, very thin material. And so you really need to pay special attention. For instance, here, strictly the wind caught it and blew it into a tree, causing a few punctures. This is an attempted fix for that hole in the plastic sheeting. Simply did a figure 8 knot after pulling the hole through there. So we will see if this is effective when the heavy rains come. This is the waterproof bag of which I mentioned earlier. It contains batteries and camera equipment. The next step will be to clear off some more of the underbrush here and start gathering shelter building materials. Time to test out and demonstrate the saw. This is a Juniperus virginiana. If you're used to the Laplander, you'll find this saw to be terribly inefficient. It binds more easily, and it's more vital that you keep a straight line. However, it does work. So I was gathering wood, and when I returned, this is what I found. The time is now 9:20. I've added an extra guy line and prepared the other two corner guy lines. Cleaning that wood up, separating the usable boughs from the trunk itself, which also will be used. Here we have the first piece of wood. It has been de-limbed using the saw. If you're used to having an axe, a small forest axe, or even just a little hatchet, you'll find that a handsaw can take a lot longer to de-limb a piece of wood. However, if a saw is all you have, then you're very happy to have the saw. So very shortly ago, it began sprinkling a little bit, which will give you motivation to continue going, trying to get a decent shelter set up. This is what we have so far. Typical A-frame. We have a Y there. We cut in a notch, and we have that ridge pole going off in that direction. Then we'll tidy this up, and we'll get some poles, and we'll build the frames off both to the left and to the right here before putting our second waterproof sheet over that, and then putting some cedar boughs and perhaps some debris on that. So this is the three pieces making the primary structure of the shelter last together. And no, that's not a pretty job. But hopefully these three, since they're relatively interlocked and the more vertical supports are actually down into the ground, hopefully the lasting is just an extra step just for peace of mind. Because this knife does not come to you razor sharp, it was my intention to not use it until until I'd had a chance to sharpen it on a stone and get a nice edge on it. However, with the number of small branches on these Juniperus virginiana trees, I'm going to go ahead and try it in its factory dull state and see if that's not faster than the saw. It's now about 10:43, and I was hoping to have the shelter completed before I began breakfast. However, I'm hungry and I'm having a loss of abilities. So, time for a little bit of peanut butter. One container is 1 day's allotment. As forecast, it is beginning to rain. The sleeping shelter is not completed yet. In fact, even the framing's not done yet. So I think it beautifully illustrates the advantage of having some sort of waterproof sheet that you can put up as the first thing, and that way under here there is a dry area in which to work. So it's continuing to rain, but I'm happy I only have a few braces left to complete the frame of this shelter. So there's a little bit of a lull in the rain, and this is with all the bracing completed. Now we will put the waterproof sheet on that and then put some insulating material over it. Well, this is the sleep shelter with the waterproof sheeting on it. Unfortunately, due to a miscalculation, that does not go all the way to the end. Therefore, special attention will be required to make sure that that's adequately waterproof. So this is with more of the cedar boughs on here. Hopefully enough to hold out the leaves and other material that I use to actually waterproof it. The time is now 12:30, and I had just stopped to get a snack. Building a debris shelter, as you might have seen on every other YouTube video in which somebody builds one of these, it takes a lot longer than you would anticipate. So go ahead, take your time, but plan ahead. It's not something that you're just going to throw together in an hour. So this is the shelter with debris material on top. Regrettably, this is all I'm going to be able to do today. I've not done anything on the inside yet, nor have I prepared a fireplace, nor the fire for tonight. If you were here for a full 72 hours, you would definitely, the next day, work on improving it. The time is 1:20 p.m. The cedar boughs are now inside, and any excess ones were placed on the outside for added insulation and waterproofing. The next step will be relatively close to build a fireplace, and hopefully I can build some good reflectors to try to redirect that heat inside to the shelter. It has been raining a lot, and therefore you can't stay under the shelter the entire day if you want to. And you can't stay under the tarp-like shelter the entire day if you want to get anything accomplished. As a result, it gets you very wet. So a fire will be vital tonight, as again it's supposed to get below freezing. That way I'll have a chance to dry out. So I have moved a few rocks over, and I'm hoping very much that that will facilitate air draft into the fire, since it has been raining probably probably about 24, 26 hours, somewhere in there. Most of the wood will be very wet, and hopefully those rocks will help reflect heat into the shelter. The time is 2:02 p.m. and the wind has gotten strong enough to actually break the ridge line, albeit of the cheap twine, and stretch out the piece of plastic. So I'm currently inside the actual sleeping shelter, debating on how to get a fire going out there. So here we come to a very important part of the test, being able to make fire. So here's a piece of cedar, and we can see that the inside is still dry. So I'm going to split this down into very small pieces and proceed from there.
The time is 3:45 p.m. The temperature has definitely been dropping. There's also a winter storm warning in effect for this area. I definitely gotten chilled, shall we say. I think it was primarily due to being wet, shivering uncontrollably. The fire is not so good, as I will show you in the next. The rain comes in waves, and the fire is hard to keep going, even with some split wood, with the majority of it split wood in there. It was a real challenge to even get a fire started. The knife also batoning through the last piece of wood. Apparently the stress waves found a focal point and it split. And the saw, even though I've been able to slightly bend it back, it had a significant bend in it, and it has warped, which means about halfway through every piece of wood, it starts binding on itself. This is from inside the shelter. The smoke definitely has a way of tracking its way in here. It's interesting, I guess the debris over the waterproof membrane also acts as a audio barrier, and so even though it could be very loud and rainy outside, in here it's relatively comfortable. I'm not sure if the light is adequate to see this, but the reflective pad is also in place, which on top of the cedar boughs provides another layer of moisture resistance and of insulation from the cold ground. However, even in the shelter right now, it is still cool enough to see your breath. This is a picture or a video of inside the shelter with the camera light on. A lot of smoke billowing through. If you're an experienced woodsman or a bushcrafter, you probably already know this, but when you have enough, when you're putting down boughs, cedar boughs, spruce boughs, as a moisture barrier or an insulation, when you have enough down, that means you've just gotten started. This is a good case in point. I had what I thought was plenty, but that's ground and that's wet ground. I did not have a chance to dig a drainage ditch around the shelter. If I was here for multiple days, that is no doubt what I would do. It's nice to see that the fire finally got going. And I'm heating some water. I don't know how well it will heat through the rock, but we'll find out. Putting the pan directly on the rock did not heat it up enough. However, putting it directly over the flames, that worked. The water heated up, I drank it, that warmed me up from the inside. So if you are cold in a situation like this, I highly recommend, even if it's just water, having something hot. The fire also has adapted or is morphed into that stage where it's primarily embers, so it'd be very good for cooking on right now, and there's a lot of radiant heat coming off. Right now while there is a lull in the rain at 4:37 p.m. Wanted to show you another outside shot. There's some smoke wafting through and coming out where the plastic stops. It's definitely on the cool side in there in the shelter, but it's even cooler out here. It's 5:08 p.m. It's not really all that cold right now. However, because of the rain earlier, it's freezing cold, or at least it feels that way to me. My original intent was to do an overnight and go just after lunch the following day. However, as I sit here shivering with not enough calories to sustain that, and the fire as it is, I'm finding it more and more unlikely that I will make it even one night. My apologies, having to use a much inferior camera here. Because the fire is so close, because of the proximity there, a lot of the smoke is going in. However, that was necessitated by the smallness of the fire. Other than that, are there things that should have been done differently to improve the likelihood of survival? Quite truthfully, I believe it is survivable, even like it is presently. It would be a very unpleasant night, and it would necessitate some drastic actions right now. I'm not in a survival situation. That's why I'm going to go ahead and end. Thank you very much for joining me on this test. It's been very insightful, at least for myself, very informative, and I appreciate you watching. I guess you could go ahead and call me Bear, but I'm going to go sleep indoors now.